The book of Yashar, chapter 36. At that time Yahuwah appeared to Yaakub, saying, Arise, go to Beit Al, and remain there, and make an altar there to Yahuwah, who appeared to you, who delivered you in your banim from affliction. And Yaakub rose up with his banim and all that belonged to him, and they went and came to Beit Al, according to the word of Yahuwah. And Yaakub was 99 years old when he went up to Beit Al. And Yaakub and his banim and all the people that were with him remained in Beit Al, in Luz. And he built an altar there to Yahuwah, who appeared to him. And Yaakub and his banim remained in Beit Al 6 months. At that time, Deborah, the daughter of Uts, died, the nurse of Ribkah, who had been with Yaakub. And Yaakub buried her beneath Beit Al, under a terebinth that was there. And Ribkah, the daughter of Betuel, the mother of Yaakub, also died at that time in Hebron. The same is Kiryath Arba. And she was buried in the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Het. And the height of Ribkah was 133 years, and she died. And when Yaakub heard that his mother Ribkah was dead, he wept bitterly for his mother, and made a great mourning for her, and for Deborah, her nurse, beneath the terebinth. And he called the name of that place Elun Bakut. And Laban, the Aramean, died in those days, for Elohim smote him because he transgressed the covenant that existed between him and Yaakub. And Yaakub was 100 years old when Yahuwah appeared to him and Barak him, and called his name Yisrael. And Rahal, the wife of Yaakub, conceived in those days. And at that time Yaakub and all belonging to him journeyed from Beit Al to go to his father's house, to Hebron. And while they were going on the way, and there was yet but a little way to come to Ephrath, Rahal bore a bond, and she had hard labor, and she died. And Yaakub buried her on the way to Ephrath, which is Beit Laham. And he put a standing column upon her grave, which is there to this day. And the days of Rahal were 45 years, and she died. And Yaakub called the name of his bond that was born to him, which Rahal bore unto him, Benjamin, for he was born to him in the land of the right hand. And it came to be after the death of Rahal that Yaakub pitched his tent, and the tent of her female servant Bilhah. And Reuben was jealous for his mother Leah because of this. And he was filled with wrath, and rose up in his wrath, and went and entered the tent of Bilhah. And there he removed his father's bed. At that time the portion of birthright, together with the sovereignty and the kahuna, were removed from the banim of Reuben. For he had profaned his father's bed, and the birthright was given to Yosef, the sovereignty to Yehuda, and the kahuna unto Louis, because Reuben had defiled his father's bed. And these are the generations of Yaakub who were born to him in Padan Aram. And the banim of Yaakub were 12. The banim of Leah, Reuben, the firstborn, and Shimun, Louis, Yehuda, Yissachar, Zabulun, and their sister Dinah. And the banim of Rahal were Yosef, Benjamin, the banim of Zilpah, Leah's female servant, Gad, and Ashar. And the banim of Bilhah, Rahal's female servant, Dan, and Naphtali. These are the banim of Yaakub, which were born to him in Padan Aram. And Yaakub and his banim, and all belonging to him, journeyed and came to Mamre, which is Kiryath Arba, that is in Hebron, where Abraham and Yitzchak sojourned. And Yaakub and his banim and all belonging to him dwelt with his father in Hebron. And his Ach, Esau, and his banim, and all belonging to him, went to the land of Seir, and dwelt there, and had possessions in the land of Seir. And the children of Esau were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly in the land of Seir. And these are the generations of Esau that were born to him in the land of Canaan. And the Banim of Esau were 5. And Adah bore to Esau his firstborn, Alipaz. And she also bore unto him Ra'ual. And Uholibamah bore unto him Yaush, Yalam, and Kurah. These are the children of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. And the Banim of Alipaz, Ban of Esau, Taman, Umar, Zapu, Gatam, Kanaz, and Amalak. And the Banim of Ra'ual, Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. And the Banim of Yaush, Tina, Alua, Yatat, and the Banim of Yalam, Allah, Pinur, and Kanaz, and the Banim of Kurah, Taman, Mibstar, Magdial, and Iram. These are the clans of the Banim of Esau according to their reigns in the land of Seir. And these are the names of the Banim of Seir, the Hurite, inhabitants of the land of Seir: Lutan, Shubal, Zebun, Anah, Dishan, Azar, and Dishun, being 7 Banim. And the children of Lutan, Haman, and their sister Timnah, that is Timnah, who came to Yaakub and his Banim, and they would not give ear to her. And she went and became a concubine to Alipaz, Ban of Esau, and she bore to him Amalek, and the Banim of Shubal, Al-Uan, Manahat, Ebal, Shapu, Unam, and the Banim of Zebun, Ayah, and Anah. And this was that Anah who found the springs in the wilderness when he fed the donkeys of Zebun, his father. And while he was feeding his father's donkeys, he led them to the wilderness at different times to feed them. And there was a day that he brought them to one of the deserts of the seashore, opposite the wilderness of the people. And while he was feeding them, see, a very heavy storm came from the other side of the sea, and rested upon the donkeys that were feeding there. And they all stood still. And afterward, about 120 great and terrible animals came from the wilderness at the other side of the sea. And they all came to the place where the donkeys were, and they placed themselves there. And those animals from their middle downwards were in the shape of children of males, and from the middle upwards some had the likeness of bears, and some had the likeness of lions, with tails behind them reaching between their shoulders, reaching down to the arets like tails of the lions. And these animals came and mounted and rode upon these donkeys and led them away, and they went away until this day. And one of these animals approached Anah and smote him with his tail, and then fled from that place. And when he saw this work, he was exceedingly afraid for his height, and he fled and escaped to the city. And he related to his Banim and brothers all that had befallen him, and much males went to seek the donkeys, but could not find them. And Anah and his brothers went to that place no more from that day following, for they were greatly afraid for their height. And the children of Anah, Ban of Seir, Dishun, and his sister Uholibamah, and the children of Dishun, Hamdan, Ashban, Yithran, and Haram, and the children of Azar, Bilhan, Zauan, and Akan, and the children of Dishun, Uts, and Aran. These are the clans of the children of Seir the Hurite, according to their reigns in the land of Seir. And Esau and his children dwelt in the land of Seir the Hurite, the inhabitants of the land, and they had possessions in it. and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. And Yaakub and his children, all belonging to them, dwelt with their father Yitzchak in the land of Canaan, as Yahuwah had commanded Abraham their father. And in the 105th year of the height of Yaakub, that is the 9th year of Yaakub's dwelling with his children in the land of Canaan, he came, chapter 37, by the way. He came from Padan Aram, and in those days Yaakub journeyed with his children from Hebron, and they went and returned to the city of Shechem, they and all belonging to them. And they dwelt there, for the children of Yaakub obtained good and fat pasture land for their cattle in the city of Shechem. The city of Shechem having then been rebuilt, and there were in it about 300 males and females. And Yaakub and his children and all belonging to him dwelt in the part of the field which Yaakub had bought from Hamor, the father of Shechem, when he came from Padan Aram, before Shimon and Lewi had smitten the city, and all those sovereigns of the Canaanites and the Amorites that had surrounded the city of Shechem heard that the Banim of Yaakub had again come to Shechem and dwelt there. And they said, Shall the Banim of Yaakub the Abri again come to the city and dwell in it after they have smitten its inhabitants and driven them out? Shall they now return and also drive out those who are dwelling in the city or slay them? And all the sovereigns of Canaan again assembled, and they came together to fight against Yaakub and his Banim. And Yashub, sovereign of Taphnach, also sent to all his neighboring sovereigns, to Alan, sovereign of Gaash, and to Ihuri, sovereign of Shilu, and to Paratun, sovereign of Hatzar, and to Susi, sovereign of Sartun, and to Laban, sovereign of Beit Hurun, and to Shabir, sovereign of Uthnaima, saying, Come up to me and assist me, and let us smite Yaakub the Abri and his Banim and all belonging to him, for they have again come to Shechem to possess it and to slay its inhabitants as before. And all these sovereigns assembled together and came with all their armies, a people exceedingly numerous, like the sand on the seashore. And they were all opposite to Taphnach. And Yashub, the sovereign of Taphnach, went out with them and all his army, and he encamped with them opposite to Taphnach, outside the city. And all the sovereigns they divided into 7 divisions, being 7 camps against the Banim of Yaakub. And they sent a declaration to Yaakub and his Ban, saying, Come out all of you to us, that we may have a word together in the plain, and avenge the cause of the males of Shechem, whom you slew in their city. And you will now again return to the city of Shechem and dwell therein, and slay its inhabitants as before. And the Banim of Yaakub heard this, and their wrath was kindled exceedingly at the words of the sovereigns of Canaan. And 10 of the Banim of Yaakub hastened and rose up, and each of them girded on his weapons of battle. And there were 102 of their servants with them, equipped in battle array. And all these males, the Banim of Yaakub with their servants, went towards these sovereigns, and Yaakub their father was with them. And they stood upon the heap of Shechem. And Yaakub halal to Yahuwah for his Banim, and he spread out his hands to Yahuwah, and he said, O Alaim, you are an almighty Alaim. You are Father. You formed us, and we are the works of your hands. Please deliver my Banim through your favor from the hand of their enemies, who are this day coming to fight against them, and save them from their hand. For in your hand is power and might to save the few from the much. And give to my Banim, your servants, strength of heart and might to fight against their enemies, to subdue them, and make their enemies fall before them. And let not my Banim and their servants die through the hands of the children of Canaan. But if it seems good in your eyes to take away the height of my Banim and their servants, take them in your great favor through your hand, or through the hands of your servants. that they may not perish this day by the hands of the sovereigns of the Amorites. And when Yaakub ceased palaling to Yahuwah, the eretz shook from its place. The greater light darkened, and all these sovereigns were afraid, and a great fear seized them. And Yahuwah listened to the palal of Yaakub, and Yahuwah impressed the hearts of all the sovereigns and their armies with the fear and awe of the Banim of Yaakub. For Yahuwah caused them to hear the sounds of chariots, the sound of mighty horses from the Banim of Yaakub, and the sound of great army accompanying them. And these sovereigns were seized with great fear at the Banim of Yaakub. And while they were standing in their borders, see, the Banim of Yaakub advanced upon them with 112 males, and a great and mighty shouting. And when the sovereigns saw the Banim of Yaakub advancing towards them, they were even more struck with fear, and they were inclined to retreat from before the Banim of Yaakub as at first, and not to fight against them. But they did not retreat, saying, it would be a disgrace to us even twice to retreat before the Abrim. And the Banim of Yaakub came near and advanced against all these sovereigns and their armies. And they looked, and see, it was a very mighty people, numerous as the sand of the sea. And the Banim of Yaakub called to Yahuwah and said, assist us, O Yahuwah, assist us and answer us, for we trust in you. And let us not die by the hands of these uncircumcised males who have come against us this day. And the Banim of Yaakub girded on their weapons of battle, and they took in their hands each male his shield and his spear, and they approached to battle. And Yehuda, Ban of Yaakub, ran first before his brothers, 10 of his servants with him, and he went towards these sovereigns. And Yashub, sovereign of Tafnach, also came out with the first of his army before Yehuda. And Yehuda saw Yashub and his army coming toward him, and Yehuda's wrath was kindled, and his wrath burned within him, and he approached to battle, in which Yehuda risked his height. And Yashub and all his army were advancing towards Yehuda, and he was riding upon a very strong and powerful horse. And Yashub was a very mighty male, covered from head to foot with iron and brass. And while he was upon the horse, he shot arrows with both hands from before and behind, as was his matter in all his battles. And he never missed the place at which he aimed his arrows. And when Yashub came to fight against Yehuda, he was shooting much arrows against Yehuda. Yehuda bound the hand of Yashub, and all the arrows that he shot rebounded upon his own males. But however, Yashub kept advancing towards Yehuda to challenge him with the arrows, but the distance between them was about 30 amah. And when Yehuda saw Yashub shooting his arrows against him, he ran towards him with his fierce might. And Yehuda took up a large stone from the ground, and its weight was 60 shekels. And Yehuda ran towards Yashub and struck him with the stone on his shield. So Yashub was stunned with the blow, and fell from off his horse to the ground. The shield split into two out of the hand of Yashub, and through the force of the blow sprang to the distance of about 15 amah. And the shield fell before the second army, and the sovereigns that came with Yashub saw at a distance the strength of Yehuda, Ban of Yaakub, and what he had done to Yashub. And they were greatly afraid of Yehuda, and they assembled near Yashub's army, seeing his confusion. And Yehuda drew his sword and smote 42 males of the army of Yashub. And the whole of Yashub's army fled before Yehuda, and no male stood against him. And they left Yashub and fled from him. And Yashub was still face down on the ground. And Yashub, seeing all the males of his camp had fled from him, hastened and rose up with fear against Yehuda, and stood up on his feet opposite Yehuda. And Yashub had one-on-one battle with Yehuda, placing shield toward shield, and Yashub's males all fled, for they were greatly afraid of Yehuda. And Yashub took his spear in his hand to strike Yehuda on his head, but Yehuda had quickly placed his shield to his head against Yashub's spear, so that the shield of Yehuda took the blow from Yashub's spear, and the shield was split in two. And when Yehuda saw that his shield was split, he hastily drew his sword and smote Yashub at his ankles and cut off his feet so that Yashub fell upon the ground. And the spear fell from his hand, and Yehuda hastily picked up Yashub's spear, with which he cut off his head and threw it next to his feet. And when the Banim of Ya'akub saw what Yehuda had done to Yashub, they all ran in the ranks of the other sovereigns, and the Banim of Ya'akub fought with the army of Yashub and the armies of all the sovereigns that were there. And the Banim of Ya'akub caused 15,000 of their males to fall, and they smote them as if smiting at gourds. The rest fled for their height. And Yehuda was still standing up by the body of Yashub, and stripped Yashub of his coat of armor. And Yehuda also took off the iron and brass that was about Yashub. And see, 9 males of his captains of Yashub approached to fight against Yehuda. And Yehuda hurried and took up a stone from the ground, and with it smote one of them on the head, and split his skull. And the body also fell from the horse to the ground. And the 8 captains that remained, seeing the strength of Yehuda, were greatly afraid, and they fled. And Yehuda with his 10 males pursued them, and they overtook them and slew them. And the Banim of Ya'akub were still smiting the armies of the sovereigns. They slew much of them. But those sovereigns boldly kept their stand with their captains, and did not retreat from their places. And they shouted against those of their armies that fled from before the Banim of Ya'akub, but none would listen to them, for they were afraid for their height, lest they should die. And all the Banim of Ya'akub, after having smitten the armies of the sovereigns, returned and came before Yehuda. And Yehuda was still slaying the 8 captains of Yashub and stripping off their garments. And Louis saw Elun, sovereign of Gaash, advancing toward him with his 14 captains to smite him. But Louis did not know it for certain. And Elun with his captains approached nearer, and Louis looked back and saw that battle was given from him behind. Louis ran with the 12 of his servants, and they went and slew Elun and his captains with the edge of the sword. Chapter 38. And Ihuri, sovereign of Shilu, came up to assist Elun, and he approached Ya'akub, when Ya'akub drew his bow that was in his hand, and smote Ihuri with the bow, with an arrow, which caused his death. And when Ihuri, sovereign of Shilu, was dead, the 4 remaining sovereigns fled from their place with the rest of the captains, and they endeavored to retreat, saying, "We have no more strength with the Abrim," after their having killed the 3 sovereigns and their captains, who are more powerful than we are. And when the Banim of Ya'akub saw that the remaining sovereigns had turned back from their station, they pursued them. And Ya'akub also came from the heap of Shechem, from the place where he was standing, and they went after the sovereigns, and they approached them with their servants. And the sovereigns and their captains and the rest of their armies, seeing that the Banim of Ya'akub approached them, were afraid for their height, and fled till they reached the city of Hatzar. And the Banim of Ya'akub pursued them to the gate of the city of Hatzar, and they smote a great smiting among the sovereigns and their armies, about 4,000 males. And while they were smiting the army of the sovereigns, Ya'akub was occupied with his bow, confining himself to smiting all the sovereigns, and he slew them all. And he slew Paratun, sovereign of Hatzar, at the gate of the city of Hatzar. Afterward he smote Susi, sovereign of Sartun, and Laban, sovereign of Beit Hurun, and Shabir, sovereign of Maknaima. And he slew them all with arrows, an arrow to each of them, and they died. And the Banim of Ya'akub, seeing that all the sovereigns were dead, and that they were disbanded and retreating, continued to carry on battle with the armies of the sovereigns opposite the gate of Hatzar. And they even smote about 400 of their males, and 3 males of the servants of Ya'akub fell in the battle. And when Yehuda saw that 3 of his servants had died, it grieved him greatly, and his wrath burned within him against the Amorites. And all the males that remained of the armies of the sovereigns were greatly afraid for their height. And they ran and broke the gate of the walls of the city of Hazar, and they all entered the city for safety. And they concealed themselves in the midst of the city of Hazar, for the city of Hazar was very large and extensive. When all these armies had entered the city, the Banim of Yaakub ran after them into the city. And 4 mighty males experienced in battle went out from the city and stood against the entrance of the city with drawn swords and spears in their hands, and they placed themselves opposite the Banim of Yaakub, and would not allow them to enter the city. And Naphtali ran and came between them with his sword, smote 2 of them, and cut off their heads with one stroke. And he turned to the other 2, and see, they had fled, and he pursued them, and overtook them, and smote them, and slew them. And the Banim of Yaakub came to the city, and looked, and see, there was another wall to the city, and they sought for the gate of the wall, and could not find it. And Yehuda leaped on the top of the wall, and Shimon and Louis followed him. And they all 3 came down from the wall into the city. And Shimon and Louis slew all the males who ran for safety into the city, and also the inhabitants of the city with their wives, their little ones, they slew with the edge of the sword. And the cries of the city ascended up to the Shamayim. And Dan and Naphtali leaped on the wall to see what caused the noise of lamentation. For the Banim of Yaakub felt anxious about their Achim. And they heard the inhabitants of the city speaking with weeping and supplication, saying, Take all that we possess in the city and go away, only do not put us to death. And when Yehuda and Shimon and Louis had ceased smiting the inhabitants of the city, they went up to the wall and called to Dan and Naphtali who were upon the wall, and to the rest of their Achim. And Shimon and Louis informed them of the entrance into the city, and all the Banim of Yaakub came to take the spoil. And the Banim of Yaakub took the spoil of the city of Hazar, the flocks and herds and the property, and they took all that could be captured, and went away on that day from the city. And on the next day the Banim of Yaakub went to Sartun, for they heard that the males of Sartun who remained in the city were assembling to fight against them for having slain their sovereign. And Sartun was a very high and fortified city, and it had a wide rampart surrounding the city. And the column of the rampart was about 50 amah, and the breadth 40 amah. And there was no place for a male to enter the city because of the rampart. And the Banim of Yaakub saw the rampart of the city, and they sought an entrance in it, but could not find it. For the entrance to the city was at the rear, and every male that wanted to come into the city came by that way, and went around the whole city, and afterwards entered the city. And the Banim of Yaakub, seeing they could not find a way into the city, their wrath was greatly kindled. And the inhabitants of the city, seeing that the Banim of Yaakub were coming to them, were greatly afraid of them, for they had heard of their strength and what they had done to Hazar. And the inhabitants of the city of Sartun could not go out towards the Banim of Yaakub after having assembled in the city to fight against them, lest they might thereby get into the city. But when they saw that they were coming towards them, they were greatly afraid of them, for they had heard of their strength and what they had done to Hazar. So the inhabitants of Sartun hastily took away the bridge of the way of the city from its place, before the Banim of Yaakub came, and they brought it into the city. And the Banim of Yaakub came and sought a way into the city, but could not find it. And the inhabitants of the city went up to the top of the wall, and looked and see, the Banim of Yaakub were seeking an entrance into the city. And the inhabitants of the city reproached the Banim of Yaakub from the top of the wall. They cursed them, and the Banim of Yaakub heard the reproaches, and they were greatly incensed, and their wrath burned within them. And the Banim of Yaakub were provoked at them, and they all rose and leaped over the rampart with the force of their strength, and through their might passed the 40 amah breadth of the rampart. And when they had passed the rampart, they stood under the wall of the city, and found all the gates of the city enclosed with iron doors. And the Banim of Ya'akub came near to break open the doors of the gates of the city, but the inhabitants did not let them. For the top of the wall they were throwing stones and arrows on them, and the number of the people that were on the wall was about 400 males. And when the Banim of Ya'akub saw that the males of the city would not let them open the gates of the city, they leaped and went up to the top of the wall. And Yehudah went up first to the east part of the city, and Gad and Ashar went up after them on the west corner of the city, and Shimun and Lui to the north, Dan and Rauban to the south. And the males who were on the top of the wall, the inhabitants of the city, seeing that the Banim of Ya'akub were coming up to them, they all fled from the wall, and came down into the city, and concealed themselves in the midst of the city. And Issachar and Naphtali, that remained under the wall, approached and broke the gates of the city, and kindled a fire at the gates of the city that melted the iron. And all the Banim of Ya'akub came into the city, they and all their males, and they fought with the inhabitants of the city of Sartun, and smote them with the edge of the sword. And no male stood before them. And about 200 males fled from the city, and they all went and hid themselves in a certain tower in the city. And Yehudah pursued them to the lower, or to the tower, and he broke down the tower, which fell upon the males, and they all died. And the Banim of Ya'akub went up the way of the roof of that tower, and they looked and see, and there was another strong high tower at the distance in the city, and the top of it reached to the Shamayim. And the Banim of Ya'akub hurried and came down, and went with all their males to the tower, and found it filled with about 300 males and females and little ones. And the Banim of Ya'akub smote a great smiting among those males in the tower, and they ran away and fled from them. And Shimun and Lui pursued them. Then 12 strong and mighty males came out to them from the place where they had concealed themselves. And those 12 males maintained a strong battle against Shimun and Lui. And Shimun and Lui could not prevail over them. And those mighty males broke the shields of Shimun and Lui. And one of them struck at Lui's head with his sword. Then Louis hastily placed his hand to his head, for he was afraid of the sword. And the sword struck Louis's hand, and it was just short of the hand of Louis being cut off. And Louis seized the sword of the mighty male in his hand, and took it forcibly from the male, and with it he struck the head of the powerful male, and he cut off his head. And 11 males approached to fight against Louis, for they saw one of them was killed. And the Banim of Ya'akub fought, but the Banim of Ya'akub could not prevail over them, for those males were very powerful. And the Banim of Ya'akub, seeing that they could not prevail over them, Shimun gave a loud and mighty shout, and the 11 powerful males were stunned at the voice of Shimun's shouting. And Yehudah at a distance knew the voice of Shimun's shouting. And Naphtali and Yehudah ran with their shields to Shimun and Lui, and found them fighting with those powerful males, unable to prevail over them, as their shields were broken. And Naphtali saw that the shields of Shimun and Lui were broken. And he took 2 shields from his servants, and brought them to Shimun and Lui. And Shimun and Lui and Yehudah and all 3 on that day fought against the 11 mighty males until the time of the greater light going down. But they could not prevail over them. And this was told to Ya'akub, and he was bitterly grieved. And he palal to Yahuwah, and he and Naphtali, his Banim, went against these mighty males. And Ya'akub approached and drew his bow, and came near to the mighty males, and slew 3 of their males with the bow. And the remaining 8 turned back, and see, the battle waged against them in the front and the rear, and they were greatly afraid for their height. And they could not stand before the Banim of Ya'akub, and they fled from before them. And in their flight they met Dan and Ashar coming towards them, and they suddenly fell upon them, and fought them, and slew 2 of them. And Yehudah and his brothers pursued them, and smote the remainder of them, and slew them. And all the Banim of Ya'aqub returned and walked about the city, searching if they could find any males. And they found about 20 young males in the cave in the city, and Gad and Yashar smote them all. And Dan and Naphtali fell upon the rest of the males who had fled and escaped from the second tower, and they smote them all. And the Banim of Ya'aqub smote all the inhabitants of the city of Sartun. But the females and little ones they left in the city and did not slay them. And all the inhabitants of the city of Sartun were powerful males. One of them would pursue 1,000, and two of them would not flee from 10,000 of the rest of males. And the Banim of Ya'aqub slew all the inhabitants of the city of Sartun with the edge of the sword, so that no male stood against them. And they left the females in the city. And the Banim of Ya'aqub took all the spoil of the city, and captured what they desired. And they took flocks and herds and property from the city. And the Banim of Ya'aqub did to Sartun and its inhabitants as they had done to Hatzar and its inhabitants. They turned and went away. Chapter 39. And when the Banim of Ya'aqub went from the city of Sartun, they had gone about 200 amah when they met the inhabitants of Tapnach coming towards them, for they went out to fight against them, because they had smitten the sovereign of Tapnach and all his males. So all who remained in the city of Tapnach came out to fight against the Banim of Ya'aqub. They intended to retake from them the booty and the spoil which they had captured from Hatzar and Sartun. And the rest of the males of Tapnach fought against the Banim of Ya'aqub in that place. And the Banim of Ya'aqub smote them, and they fled before them, and they pursued them to the city of Arbalan. And they all fell before the Banim of Ya'aqub. And the Banim of Ya'aqub returned and came to Tapnach to take away the spoil of Tapnach. But when they came to Tapnach, they heard that the people of Arbalan had gone out to meet them and to save the spoil of their brothers. And the Banim of Ya'aqub left 10 of their males in Tapnach to plunder the city. And they went towards the people of Arbalan. And the males of Arbalan went out with their wives to fight against the Banim of Ya'aqub, for their wives were experienced in battle, and they went out about 400 males and females. And all the Banim of Ya'aqub shouted with a loud voice, and they all ran towards the inhabitants of Arbalan, and with a great and mighty voice. And the inhabitants of Arbalan heard the noise of the shouting of the Banim of Ya'aqub, and their roaring like the noise of lions, like the roaring of the sea and its waves. The fear and dread possessed their hearts because of the Banim of Ya'aqub, and they were terribly afraid of them, and they retreated and fled before them into the city. And the Banim of Ya'aqub pursued them to the gate of the city, and they came upon them in the city. And the Banim of Ya'aqub fought with them in the city, and all their females were engaged in slaying against the Banim of Ya'aqub. And the combat was very severe among them the whole of that day till evening. And the Banim of Ya'aqub could not prevail over them. And the Banim of Ya'aqub had almost perished in that battle. And the Banim of Ya'aqub cried to Yahuwah, and greatly gained strength towards evening. And the Banim of Ya'aqub smote all the inhabitants of Arbalan with the edge of the sword, males, females, little ones, and also the remainder of the people who had fled from Sartun. The Banim of Ya'aqub smote them in Arbalan. And the Banim of Ya'aqub did to Arbalan and Tapnach as they had done to Hatzar and Sartun. And when the females saw that all the males were dead, they went up onto the roofs of the city and struck the Banim of Ya'aqub by showering down stones like rain. And the Banim of Ya'aqub hastened and came into the city and seized all the females and smote them with the edge of the sword. And the Banim of Ya'aqub captured all the spoil and the booty and the flocks, the herds and the cattle. And the Banim of Ya'aqub did to Manayma as they had done to Tapnach and to Hatzar and to Shilu. And they turned from there and went away. And on the 5th day the Banim of Ya'aqub heard that the people of Gaash had gathered against them to battle, because they had slain their sovereign and their captains. For there had been 14 captains in the city of Gaash, and the Banim of Yaakub had slain them all in the first battle. And the Banim of Yaakub girded on their weapons of battle array in that day. And they marched to battle against the inhabitants of Gaash, and in Gaash there was a strong and mighty people, of the people of the Amorites. And Gaash was the strongest and best fortified city of all the cities of the Amorites, and it had 3 walls. And the Banim of Yaakub came to Gaash, and they found the gates of the city locked, about 500 males standing at the top of the outermost wall. And a people numerous as the sand upon the seashore were in ambush for the Banim of Yaakub outside the city at the rear of it. And the Banim of Yaakub approached to the open gates of the city, but while they were drawing near, see, those who were in ambush at the rear of the city came out from their places and surrounded the Banim of Yaakub. And the Banim of Yaakub were enclosed between the people of Gaash, and the battle was to both their front and their rear. And all the males that were on the wall were shooting arrows and stones from the wall upon them. And Yehuda, seeing that the males of Gaash were getting too numerous from them, gave a most piercing and mighty cry, and all the males of Gaash were afraid of the voice of Yehuda's cry. And males fell from the wall at his powerful shout, and all those that were from without and within the city were greatly afraid for their height. And the Banim of Yaakub still came near to break the doors of the city, when the males of Gaash shot stones and arrows upon them from the top of the wall, and made them flee from the gate. And the Banim of Yaakub returned against the males of Gaash, who were with them from outside the city, and they smote them terribly, as striking against gourds. And they could not stand against the Banim of Yaakub, for fear and dread had seized them at the cry of Yehuda. And the Banim of Yaakub slew all these males who were outside the city. And the Banim of Yaakub still drew near to make their way into the city, and to fight under the city walls. But they could not, for the inhabitants of Gaash who remained in the city had surrounded the walls of Gaash in every direction, so that the Banim of Yaakub were unable to approach the city to fight against them. And the Banim of Yaakub drew near to one corner to fight under the wall. The inhabitants of Gaash shot arrows and stones upon them like showers of rain, and they fled from under the wall. And the people of Gaash, who were on the wall, seeing that the Banim of Yaakub could not prevail over them from under the wall, reproached the Banim of Yaakub with these words, saying, What is the matter with you in the battle that you cannot prevail? Can you then do to the mighty city of Gaash and its inhabitants as you did to the cities of the Amorites that were not so powerful? Only to those weak ones among us did you do these matters, and slew them in the entrance of the city, for they had no strength, when they were afraid at the sound of your shouting. And will you now be able to fight in this place? Only here you will all die, and we will avenge the cause of those cities that you have laid waste. And the inhabitants of Gaash greatly reproached the Banim of Yaakub, and reviled them with their mighty ones, and continued to shoot arrows and stones upon them from the wall. And Yehuda and his brothers heard the words of the inhabitants of Gaash, and their wrath was greatly roused. And Yehuda was jealous of his Alaim in this matter. And he called out and said, O Yahuwah, send assistance to us and our brothers. And he ran at a distance with all his might, with his drawn sword in his hand, and he leaped from the arets, and by means of his strength climbed the wall. But his sword fell from his hand, and Yehuda shouted on the wall, and all the males that were on the wall were afraid. Some of them fell from the wall into the city and died, and those who were still on the wall, when they saw Yehuda's strength, were greatly afraid, and fled for their high into the city for safety. And some were emboldened to fight against Yehuda on the wall, and they came near to slay him, when they saw there was no sword in Yehuda's hand. And they thought of casting him from the wall to his Achim, and 20 males of the city came up to assist them, and they surrounded Yehuda, and they all shouted over him, and approached him with drawn swords, and they frightened Yehuda, and Yehuda cried out to his Akim from the wall. And Yehuda and his Banim drew the bow from under the wall, and smote 3 of the males who were upon the top of the wall. And Yehuda continued to cry, and he exclaimed, O Yahuwah, assist us, O Yahuwah, deliver us. And he cried out with a loud voice on the wall, and the cry was heard at a great distance. And after this cry he again repeated the shout. And all the males who surrounded Yehuda on the top of the wall were afraid, and they each threw his sword from his hand at the sound of Yehuda's shouting and his shaking, and fled. And Yehuda took the swords which he had fallen from their hands, and Yehuda fought with them, and slew 20 of their males on the wall. And about 80 males and females still went up from the wall to the city, and they surrounded Yehuda. But Yehuda impressed the fear of Yehuda in their hearts, and they were unable to approach him. And Yaakub and all who were with him drew the bow from under the wall, and they slew 10 males on the wall. And they fell below the wall before Yaakub and his Banim. And the people on the wall, seeing that 20 of their males had fallen, still ran towards Yehuda with drawn swords, but they could not approach him, for they were greatly afraid of Yehuda's strength. And one of their mighty males, whose name was Arud, approached to strike Yehuda on the head with his sword. Then Yehuda hastily put his shield to his head, and the sword hit the shield, was split into 2. And this mighty male, after he had struck Yehuda, ran for his height at the fear of Yehuda, but his feet slipped on the wall, and he fell among the Banim of Yaakub who were below the wall. And the Banim of Yaakub smote him and slew him. And Yehuda's head pained him from the blow of the powerful male, and Yehuda had nearly died from it. And Yehuda cried out on the wall because the pain made by the blow. When Dan heard him, his wrath burned within him, and he also rose up and went at a distance, and ran, and leaped from the arets, and climbed the wall with his fierce strength. And when Dan came upon the wall near to Yehuda, all the males of the wall who had stood against Yehuda fled, and they went up to the second wall, and they shot arrows and stones upon Dan and Yehuda from the second wall, and strove to drive them from the wall. And the arrows and stones struck Dan and Yehuda, and they had nearly been killed on the wall. But wherever Dan and Yehuda fled from the wall, they were attacked with arrows and stones from the second wall. And Yaakub and his Banim were still at the entrance of the city below the first wall. But they were not able to draw their bow against the inhabitants of the city, as they could not be seen by them, being on the second wall. And when Dan and Yehuda could no longer bear the stones and arrows that fell upon them from the second wall, both leaped to the second wall near the people of the city. And when the people of the city who were on the second wall saw that Dan and Yehuda had come to them on the second wall, they all cried out and came down below between the walls. And Yaakub and his Banim heard the noise of shouting from the people of the city, but they were still at the entrance of the city. And they were anxious about Dan and Yehuda, who were not seen by them, being on the second wall. And Naphtali went up with his fierce might, and leaped upon the first wall to see what caused the noise of shouting, which they had heard in the city. And Issachar and Zabulon drew near to break down the doors of the city, and they opened the gates of the city, and came into the city. And Naphtali leaped from the first wall to the second, and came to assist his Akim. And the inhabitants of Gaash, who were on the wall, seeing that Naphtali was the third who had come up to assist his Akim, all fled and went down into the city. And Yaakub and all his Banim and all their young males came into the city to them. And Yehuda and Dan and Naphtali came down from the wall into the city, and pursued the inhabitants of the city. But Shimon and Levi were outside the city, and did not know that the gate was opened. And they went up from there to the wall, and came down to their Achim into the city. And the inhabitants of the city had all come down into the city, and the Banim of Yaakub came to them in different directions, and the battle waged against them from the front in from the rear, and the Banim of Ya'akub smote them terribly, and slew about 20,000 of them, males and females. Not one of them could stand up against the Banim of Ya'akub. And the blood flowed plentifully in the city, and it was like a stream of water. And the blood flowed like a stream to the outer part of the city, and reached to the desert of Beit Horon. And the people of Beit Horon saw the blood at a distance flowing from the city of Gaash. About 70 males from among them ran to see the blood. And they came to the place where the blood was, and they followed the path of the blood, and came to the wall of the city of Gaash, and they saw the blood issue from the city, and they heard the voice of crying from the inhabitants of Gaash, for it ascended to the Shamayim. And the blood continued to flow abundantly like a stream of water, and all the Banim of Ya'akub were still smiting the inhabitants of Gaash, and were engaged in slaying them till evening, about 20,000 males and females. And the people of Harun said, Indeed, this is the work of the Abrim, for they are still continuing to fight in all the cities of the Amorites. And those people hastened and ran to Beit Horon. Each took his weapons of battle. They cried out to all the inhabitants of Beit Horon, who also girded on their weapons of battle to go to fight against the Banim of Ya'akub. And when the Banim of Ya'akub had finished smiting the inhabitants of Gaash, they walked about the city to strip all the slain. And coming in from the innermost part of the city, and farther on, they met 3 powerful males, and there was no sword in their hand. And the Banim of Ya'akub came up to the place where they were, and the powerful males ran away. But one of them had taken Zabulun, who he saw was a young male and short stature, and with his might dashed him to the ground. And Ya'akub ran to him with his sword, and Ya'akub smote him below the loins with his sword, and cut him in two, and the body fell upon Zabulun. And the second one approached and seized Ya'akub to cut him in the ground. But Ya'akub turned to him and shouted at him, while Shimun and Louis ran and smote him on the hips with the sword, and cut him to the ground. And the powerful male rose up from the ground with fierce might, and Yehuda came to him before he had gained his footing, and struck him on the head with the sword, and his head was split, and he died. And the third powerful male, seeing that his companions were killed, ran from before the Banim of Ya'akub, and the Banim of Ya'akub pursued him in the city. And while the powerful male was fleeing, he found one of the swords of the inhabitants of the city, and he picked it up and turned to the Banim of Ya'akub, and fought them with the sword. And the powerful male ran at Yehuda to strike him on the head with the sword, but there was no shield in the hand of Yehuda. And while he was aiming to strike him, Naphtali hastily took his shield and put it to Yehuda's head. And the sword of the powerful male hit the shield of Naphtali, and Yehuda escaped the sword. And Shimun and Louis ran at the powerful male with their swords, and struck him mightily with their swords. And the 2 swords entered the body of the powerful male, and divided it in 2 lengthwise. And the Banim of Ya'akub smote 3 mighty males at that time, together with all the inhabitants of Gaash. And the day was about to decline, and the Banim of Ya'akub walked about Gaash, and took all the spoil of the city. Even the little ones and females they did not allow to live. And the Banim of Ya'akub did to Gaash as they had done to Sartun and Shilu. Chapter 40.